Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we are talking about arterial supply of lower limb. Our objectives are describe femoral artery and its relations and list the branches of femoral artery, define trochanteric and cruciate anastomosis, describe popliteal artery, its relations and branches, discuss the arterial anastomosis around knee joint, discuss the anterior tibial artery, its relations and branches, define dorsalis pedis artery, discuss the posterior tibial artery, its relations and branches, and in the last we will talk about the terminal branches of posterior tibial artery. So we start with the first artery or the major artery which is supplying blood to the lower limb is femoral artery. So femoral artery enters high by passing behind inguinal ligament, and it is a continuation of external iliac artery which is formed by or which is a branch of common iliac artery, and two common iliac artery are the terminal branches of abdominal aorta. So the abdominal aorta terminate into two common iliac, and right and left common iliac terminate into external iliac and internal iliac. So external iliac passes behind inguinal ligament and continues after crossing inguinal ligament as femoral artery, and it descends downward in the middle third of the thigh and ends at the opening in the adductor magnus muscle and continues as popliteal artery. The popliteal artery is the continuation of femoral artery. So femoral artery starts its journey at inguinal ligament and ends at adductor hiatus and becomes popliteal artery. Interiorly, we have skin, fascia and sartorius, which is a very important muscle of the lower limb, and running obliquely in the thigh. It passes over the femoral artery anteriorly. Posteriorly, we have psoas major. Femoral artery lies on psoas major. Laterally, we have femoral nerve, and medially, we have femoral vein. So here you can see that the abdominal aorta divides into two common iliac arteries, right common iliac and left common iliac arteries. Right common iliac further divisible into external iliac and internal iliac. Internal iliac goes to the pelvis to supply the pelvic organs, and external iliac runs downward, and when it passes through the inguinal ligament, which is a ligament present between tibial spine and pubic tubercle, just passing below inguinal ligament, it continues as femoral artery lying over psoas major muscle. This is the psoas major muscle, if you can see, descending down from the lower part of the abdomen. So artery passing anterior to it descends downwards, and in the middle third of the thigh it enters into an opening that is known as adductor hiatus, and from adductor hiatus it posteriorly continues as popliteal artery. So here you can see the artery is descending down, and as it passes through adductor hiatus it becomes popliteal artery. So it runs downward and almost medially, and running at the lower part just below the muscle, that is rectus femoris, and over vastus medialis. So that is the extent of the femoral artery from inguinal ligament till adductor hiatus, where it becomes popliteal artery. If we talk about its relations, this is anterior tibial spine and this is pubic tubercle. So this is our inguinal ligament, and just below inguinal ligament already you have talked about femoral triangle as well as femoral sheath. This area is femoral triangle area, and over here we have a sheath which is known as femoral sheath, and in femoral sheath there are three compartments. The lateral compartment is for femoral artery, intermediate compartment is for femoral vein, and most medial compartment, which is also known as femoral canal, is for lymph nodes, which are known as lymph nodes of cruciate. So most medial compartment is for the lymph nodes, intermediate compartment is for femoral vein, and lateral compartment is for femoral artery. So femoral vein lies medial to femoral artery and femoral nerve lies lateral to femoral artery. That is a very important relation, and this is a very important area of the body, because if you are having a direct injury over here, a sharp injury on this area, so you are cutting two major vessels which are draining and supplying the lower limb. These are the relations for the femoral artery, and here is the tendon of Sos on which the femoral artery is lying, and this is sartorius. So sartorius passes anterior to this femoral artery. The branches of femoral artery, there are three superficial branches and three deep branches. The superficial branches are superficial circumflex iliac artery, superficial epigastric artery, superficial external pudendal artery. And for deep external pudendal artery, descending genicular artery, and another branch which is the deep branch of femoral artery or profunda femoris artery. So these are six branches. Five are mentioning over here, and the sixth one is on the next slide. These superficial branches as circumflex iliac, as the name is indicating, it is just surrounding the iliac region and supplying that area. Superficial epigastric in supplying the superficial part of the epigastric region of the abdomen, and external pudendal is supplying the lower part of the pelvis, and deep external pudendal is supplying the deep part of the lower pelvis, and descending genicular is descending downward, and it takes part anastomosis formation at knee joint. And this is the sixth branch, that is profunda femoris artery. We have six branches of femoral artery, three superficial and three deep. And this is the largest branch of femoral artery, known as profunda femoris, or deep artery of the femoral artery. Its large branch enters the medial compartment of thigh, and it ends by becoming fourth perforating artery. It has following branches: medial femoral circumflex, lateral femoral circumflex, and first, second, and third perforating arteries. So there are total two branches around the femoral neck, which are medial and lateral femoral arteries, and three perforating arteries which are perforating and supplying the deeper structure. That's why they are known as perforating. And the fourth one is that this artery continues as, or the terminal part of femoral profunda femoris artery continues as fourth perforating artery. So we can see in the diagram. So here we can see this is our abdominal aorta, common iliac, internal, and this is external iliac. Adding one ligament from femoral, and femoral artery will descend downward, and as it descends downward, it gives a deep artery of the thigh. So this deep artery of the thigh give lateral circumflex, which is moving over here, as you can see, and medial circumflex, which is running on the medial aspect. So medial and lateral circumflex femoral arteries are surrounding the neck of uh, the femur, and we can say that it is surrounding the what we say circumference of the femur. That's why they are known as circumflex femoral arteries. Here we have head, neck, trochanter, intertrochanteric line, and then the junction between upper and the shaft. So here we have arteries which are known as circumflex femoral arteries, and then it gives down and gives perforating branches, as you can see, one, two, three, and the fourth one is the terminal part of, or the profunda femoris continuous as four perforating. So four perforating arteries and medial and lateral circumflex, these are the major branches which are supplying the area of thigh. And also already we have discussed about this in hip joint, that there are arteries which or branches from the abdominal artery which are supplying the head of the femur. Already we have discussed about this and also the avascular necrosis of the head of the femur. And here you can see the terminal branches, or the branches from the femoral directly, superficial epigastrix, external pudendal, superficial circumflex iliac. These are the branches which are the superficial branches of femoral artery. And here femoral artery runs downward, and at adductor hiatus it becomes popliteal artery. So that is all about femoral artery, 3 superficial and 3 deep branches. So here also you can compare the superficial part and the deeper part. This is the superficial part, this is the femoral artery, and as the deep artery originates from here, it runs deeply and it supplies the deeper muscles through perforating branches, which are first, second and third perforating branches over here, and then it further descends downward. And here you can appreciate the perforating branches, first, second, third, and then the terminal end of the deep artery as fourth perforating. And here you can see the adductor hiatus, and through adductor hiatus the femoral artery which runs downward passes through this adductor hiatus and become posterior, and this is the anterior view and this is the posterior view. So in posterior view you can appreciate that femoral artery which is passing through here enters through this opening and becomes popliteal artery. Now there are very important anastomosis takes place around the hip joint area. There are two anastomosis. One is known as trochanteric anastomosis and other is known as cruciate anastomosis. So trochanteric anastomosis, this anastomosis between the branches of internal iliac and femoral arteries. And again, already we have discussed in the problem also that these anastomoses are providing collateral channels. So if a major artery is blocked, these arteries will provide a collateral circulation and the area will not be necrosed. So mainly supply to the head of the femur from the anastomotic channels along with the musculature around it. Branches forming anastomosis: superior gluteal artery, inferior gluteal artery, and medial femoral circumflex and lateral femoral circumflex. So superior and inferior gluteal arteries are coming from interiliac, and medial and lateral femoral circumflex are coming from femoral artery. So this is the union between branches of interiliac and femoral. Here you can see this is the internal iliac artery. Internal iliac artery will give superior gluteal and inferior gluteal, and these superior and inferior gluteal are anastomosed with the medial and lateral circumflex. So this anastomosis is mainly taking place around the trochanteric area. So that's why it is known as trochanteric anastomosis, and also to supply the area in the same region. This is known as trochanteric anastomosis between the interiliac branches, superior and inferior gluteal arteries, and the femoral artery branches, lateral circumflex femoral and medial circumflex femoral, which are actually the branches of deep artery of the thigh or profunda femoris artery. The other anastomosis which is taking place over here is cruciate anastomosis. This is known as cruciate because the arteries are crossing each other like an X. That's why it is known as cruciate anastomosis. So this anastomosis between the branches of interiliac and femoral also. But here the inferior gluteal is anastomoting with the medial and lateral circumflex as well as the first perforating. So one artery we have for branches we have for the interiliac and three for the femoral. So in occlusion of the proximal part of the femoral artery, blood passes through the cruciate and trochanteric anastomosis to provide collateral circulation to this area. Here you can see first perforating, lateral circumflex femoral and medial circumflex femoral and inferior gluteal. This one. So this anastomosis is taking place between the femoral artery branches and internal iliac artery branches, and we name it as cruciate anastomosis. Now after the femoral artery, the second artery of this region is popliteal artery, which is a continuation of femoral artery, and as we have discussed it starts its journey at the adductor hiatus and it ends at the lower border of the popliteus muscle by dividing into two arteries, anterior tibial and posterior tibial arteries. The relations of the popliteal artery: anteriorly we have popliteal surface of the femur, knee joint and popliteus muscle. So it lies in the popliteal fossa behind, and posteriorly we have popliteal vein and tibial nerve. So it lies behind the knee joint and popliteus muscle. So here we can see the femoral artery which runs downward. The popliteal artery arises from the adductor hiatus and runs downward. So this is the popliteal surface of the femur, and anteriorly we have knee joint, and posteriorly we have femoral vein and tibial nerve with it. You can popliteal vein and tibial nerve with it, as you can see. Here you can also see this is popliteal fossa, biceps heads over here, and on the medial side we have upper part is semiterinosis, and below we have two heads of gastrocnemius. So they form a area which is known as popliteal fossa. So in popliteal fossa it lies, and as you can see the femoral artery runs from anteriorly to posteriorly. So from anteriorly it runs or enter into adductor hiatus, and from adductor hiatus it becomes popliteal artery and descends downward behind these semiterinosis and semilunar muscles. And in popliteal fossa it lies just medial, and lateral to it is the popliteal vein and tibial nerve over here. And over here it divides into two branches as anterior tibial and posterior. So the branches of the popliteal artery, there are muscular branches to the surrounding muscles, and already we discussed that we don't name the muscular branches because not a single muscle is supplied by the artery. Many muscles are supplied by, or group of muscles are supplied by the artery. So we just say muscular branches of popliteal artery, articular branches to the knee joint, and its terminal branches are anterior tibial and posterior tibial. So now anastomosis around the knee joint is taking place between the branches of femoral artery, popliteal artery, and anterior and posterior tibial arteries. So again a massive anastomosis is taking place around knee joint or a good mobile joint of the body. Branches forming anastomosis, branches from the femoral artery. So if you remember we talked about a descending genicular, which is a sort of a deeper branch from the femoral artery, or one of the deeper branch. So this descending genicular artery descends downward and it anastomoses with the arteries which are the branches of popliteal artery as lateral superior genicular, medial superior genicular, lateral inferior genicular, and medial inferior genicular. So these are four genicular branches from the popliteal artery which anastomose with descending genicular artery and small branches of anterior posterior arteries, and combinedly they all form anastomosis around the knee joint. So you can see this is our femoral artery which is running downward, and from anterior compartment it goes to the posterior compartment through adductor hiatus and becomes popliteal artery, and then popliteal artery descends downward from popliteal fossa and divides into anterior and posterior tibial arteries. So here you can see a descending genicular branch from femoral artery before it enters into adductor hiatus. So this genicular branch descends downward and it anastomoses with superior medial and superior lateral genicular and inferior medial and inferior genicular arteries. Along with that, these channels, there are arteries which are known as circumflex fibular artery, recurrent branch of anterior tibial, and from branches from the popliteal as inferior medial genicular, they all anastomose together. So as we have discussed earlier that recurrent means that artery is arising and then going back toward the opposite direction of the parent artery. That's why it is known as recurrent. And circumfibular, which is making a circle around the fibular head, is also taking part in anastomosis. These are the branches of anterior and posterior tibial. So here we can see that descending genicular, superior and inferior lateral genicular, superior and medial inferior, superior and inferior medial genicular, circumflex fibular, and recurrent branch of tibial, they all are taking part in anastomosis around the knee joint and provide a good collateral circulation in case of blockage of major artery. So this is all about the anastomotic channels. Now we will talk about anterior tibial artery, which is a branch of popliteal. So it is a in terms of drainage supply, as well as in terms of their formation. Anterior tibial artery is a smaller terminal branch of popliteal artery. It lies on the anterior surface of interosseous membrane. So just after taking origin through interosseous membrane, as we have discussed in the previous lecture, that there are two openings in the interosseous membrane, just below superior tibiofibular joint and just above to inferior tibiofibular joint. Through the superior tibiofibular joint, just below that, we have an opening in the interosseous membrane. Through that interosseous membrane opening, anterior tibial artery, which is arising actually on the forming on the posterior part of the leg, enters into the anterior compartment and runs on the interosseous membrane. In the upper part, it lies deep to the muscles of anterior compartment, but in the lower part, it becomes superficial at the lower end of the tibia, and then it lies between the tendons of extensor hallucis longus and extensor digitorum longus. So here you can see this is the anterior popliteal artery, which is descending downward over here, and then it divides into anterior tibial and posterior tibial. So what we can looking here is the posterior tibial, and this is anterior. If you can see, the anterior tibial is just entering into the anterior compartment. So here you can see from this junction between the tibia and fibula in the interosseous membrane, there is an opening. Through this anterior tibial artery descends downward and it lies below the anterior compartment muscles. But as it descends downward, just below above ankle, it lies between the tendons of two very important muscles, which are extensor hallucis and extensor digitorum longus, as you can see. So it descends downward in the anterior compartment deeply, but as it reaches down, crossing ankle, it becomes superficial and lies between the tendons of these two muscles, and changes its name from anterior tibial artery to dorsalis pedis artery. Pedis for the foot and dorsalis for the dorsal foot, for the artery for the dorsum of the foot. So anterior tibial artery continues as dorsalis pedis artery. So in front of the ankle joint, the artery becomes the dorsalis pedis artery. Its branches are muscular branches to the muscles of anterior compartment, anastomotic branches around the knee and the ankle joint. Dorsalis pedis artery, also called dorsal artery of the foot, as we have discussed that pedis is the foot and dorsal is for the dorsal. It is a continuation of the anterior tibial artery. It terminates by joining the lateral plantar artery and completes a arch which is formed in the plantar arch. So dorsal pedis artery is a continuation of anterior tibial artery just in front of the ankle, and it terminates by joining lateral plantar artery and completes the plantar arch. On the dorsum of the foot, it lies between the tendons of extensor hallucis longus and extensor digitorum longus, and this is the pulsation point of this artery. We will also see the picture in the last for the pulsation. So here we can see anterior artery, which is descending downward, and it passes down in front of the ankle, and as it passes below the superior and inferior extensor reticula, it becomes in between the extensor hallucis longus tendon and extensor digitorum longus tendon, and this is the place for the pulsation of dorsalis pedis artery, and it moves forward, and at first dorsal interosseous it becomes deeper and it connects with the lateral plantar artery and form the arch which is known as plantar arch. The dorsalis pedis artery gives a lateral tarsal artery, arcuate artery, through which metatarsal branches are arising, and first dorsal metatarsal artery. So here we can see that the dorsalis pedis artery is descending down. So it gives tarsal artery, and then it is descending down and giving an arch, like, because the artery gives a branch which is forming an arch like structure. That's why this artery is known as arcuate artery, and from arcuate artery the branches which are arising known as metatarsal arteries. You can see, and also having a artery which is known as first dorsal metatarsal arteries. These are the branches from dorsal species: lateral tarsal, dorsal metatarsal, and arcuate. And arcuate ultimately give metatarsal branches. So metatarsal branches will move forward and supply the tarsal as well as the digits. Now, after the anterior compartment, for the posterior compartment, the larger terminal branch of popliteal artery is posterior tibial artery. It lies deep to gastrocnemius and soleus muscles. Already we have discussed that neurovascular bundle of the posterior compartment runs between the superficial and deep group of the muscles. So it lies deep to the superficial muscles, which are gastrocnemius and soleus. In the lower part of the leg, artery is only covered by skin and fascia, becomes superficial, and it passes behind the medial malleolus and terminates by dividing into medial and lateral plantar arteries. And the area between the medial malleolus and the heel, we can perceive this artery. So here we can see the popliteal artery divides into anterior tibial and posterior tibial. So posterior tibial runs deep to the gastrocnemius and soleus, runs downward, and as it passes the lower part, it becomes superficial and it lies just behind the medial malleolus and enters into the sole of the foot. And in the sole of the foot, it divides into two branches: medial plantar artery and lateral plantar artery. And here we can see the relation. So this is our posterior tibial artery, which is running downward, passes behind flexor retinaculum, and also the just in relation or posterior to the medial malleolus and runs downward. So between medial malleolus and the heel, here we can perceive the posterior tibial artery, and as it reaches in the sole of the foot, it divides into lateral plantar and medial plantar. Now the branches of the posterior tibial artery, we have a very important branch which is known as fibular artery or peroneal artery. This artery is mainly for the lateral compartment. Large branch arises close to the origin. It gives muscular branches. Nutrient artery to the fibula is given by posterior tibial directly through peroneal and perforating branch. And regarding the posterior tibial muscular branches to the muscle of posterior compartment, nutrient artery to the tibia. So directly posterior tibial artery supply the tibia, and through peroneal branch to the fibula. And terminal branches are medial and lateral plantar arteries, and anastomotic branches around the ankle joint. So here we can see just after formation of posterior tibial artery, it gives the important branch which is known as fibular artery, which descends downward, and this fibular artery will give branch to the fibula as well as it descends downward, and mainly it supplies the lateral compartment of the leg and descends downward there. And the major posterior tibia will give muscular branches and also branch to the tibia, nutrient branch, and at the sole divided into medial plantar and lateral plantar. So posterior tibial is arising from here and then it is developing into medial plantar and lateral plantar. Now we start with medial plantar. The smaller terminal branch of the posterior tibial artery supplies medial side of the big toe. It gives muscular branches, cutaneous branches, and articular branches. So here, posterior tibial after crossing medial malleolus enters into sole of the foot and divides into medial plantar and lateral plantar. Medial plantar runs on the medial aspect, supply the medial side of the big toe and the musculature for a smaller area. The lateral plantar is the larger branch of the posterior tibial artery, and on the fifth metatarsal bone it forms an arch which is known as plantar arch by joining the dorsal spadius artery, which we have previously seen that between the first cleft between the big toe and the finger, the artery dorsal spadius descending downward and entering or communicating with the plantar branches and forming plantar arch. So it gives muscular branches, cutaneous branches, and articular branches. Branches from the plantar arch are plantar metatarsal arteries. From plantar metatarsal arteries, we have plantar digital arteries. Three perforating arteries anastomose with the vessels on the dorsal aspect of the foot. So here you can see now the posterior tibial artery divides at the sole into medial and lateral. Lateral plantar runs from the medial side to the lateral side, and then it make an arch-like structure just at the basis of metatarsal groove. So this arch completes by union of a branch which is coming from here, that is the dorsal spadius artery. So they connect together and form this arch. So this is the plantar arch, and this plantar arch will further give the branches which are known as metatarsal arteries. Plantar, metatarsal. So these are plantar metatarsal arteries. So plantar metatarsal arteries then terminate into digital branches. So lateral plantar will form the arch with the dorsal spadius artery union as plantar arch. Plantar arch will give plantar metatarsal branches, and metatarsal branches will terminate into digital arteries. And along with this, they also give perforating branches. So the three perforating branches will penetrate from the sole of the foot and enter into dorsum deeply from here and communicate the sole of the foot supply to the dorsum. So the anastomosis over here is taking place between the dorsum and the plantar through perforating branches of lateral plantar. That was all about the arterial supply of the lower limb, and here we can see in the last areas of the lower limb arterial pulsation. So femoral pulse is felt at the femoral triangle area in the upper part just below inguinal ligament or midpoint of inguinal ligament. We pulsate over here. Then the second, this is femoral, the popliteal just at the posterior part of the leg, that is popliteal fossa. In the middle we will say the popliteal artery. Between the tendons of extensor hallucis longus and extensor digitorum longus we pulsate the dorsal spadius artery on the dorsum, and just behind the medial malleolus we pulsate the pulsation of posterior tibial artery. So these are the areas of pulsation of arteries, major arteries of the lower limb. So this is whole about the major arteries, their origin, their termination, and their branches and important relations. This is all about the overview of lower limb arterial supply. So, for question, please contact on email. Thank you very much.